Hello, folks. This is Empowering Democracy, and this is another Dump the Corruption show, dealing tonight with the fundraising of Gary Palmer from the Alabama 6th, Byron Donalds, the Florida 19th, Mike Collins of the Georgia 10th, Warren Davidson of the Ohio 8th, Randy Weber of the Texas 14th, all Freedom Caucus members. This is our final examination of the Freedom Caucus members in the House. We've gone through 20 of them already. All 20 have failed the litmus test. And now we have to test these 5 here tonight. I'm pretty sure I'll be joined in a few minutes by Dee Pierce of Around the World with Dee and Friends. She and Madeline Hoffman and I just had a very scintillating show defending Roger Waters from scurrilous attacks from people very closely associated with the Israeli regime, wanting to support the current Israeli regime and interested in denying Palestinians their rights. So we're a little late tonight because that took a little bit of time, I'm afraid. But we're here now, and I'm still waiting for Dee, but I'm going to go ahead and start presenting the records of the 5 congressmen we've named. Robert Copeland is here. Joe, my guess is all 5 of these people will fail the litmus test. I'm sure you're right, Robert, because we haven't had any of the progressives pass the litmus test, haven't had any of the regular Dems pass the litmus test, haven't had any of the regular Republicans pass the litmus test. So why should any of the 25 people from the Freedom Caucus pass the litmus test? It would be a very great surprise if any of them did. But anyway, we'll go on with this. As of now, Gary Palmer is from the Alabama 6th District. And here's the summary page for his race in 2022. Let's see if any other folks have arrived except for Robert. No, I guess not yet. I will hear Dee, however, when she joins, for sure. Anyway, here's the summary data for Gary Palmer. He's an incumbent. He was the winner in 2022. He raised $1.206 million, spent $1.131 million, ended with cash on hand of $446,066. He was unopposed. Now, not quite unopposed. There were 2 independent candidates and 1 libertarian candidate who evidently entered the race, but Open Secrets has no data on them. Only one to have any data on is the Republican Gary Palmer. They also don't have any data on outside spending in this race, which they usually have in the summary tab. Let us move on quickly then to the candidates tab and see what we get. We have Gary Palmer with 84.7% of the vote. Not surprising, since he was relatively unopposed. Small individual contributions, this must set some kind of record. Out of $1,206,726, he raised $1,167 in small individual contributions, 0.10% of what he raised. That's got to be some kind of awful record. In large individual contributions, that is contributions over $200, which are given by well-off and relatively rich people, Gary Palmer had $685,795, or 57% from those people. And in PAC contributions, he had almost $411,000. In the other category, he also raised $109,000. So he fails the litmus test on two counts. One is the large individual contributions category, and the other are his PAC, the contributions. And let's see if we can find out anything else about who supports Gary Palmer. Very quickly, contributors. The American Israel Public Affairs Committee, in other words, AIPAC, 29,000. 20,000 from Kai Kennedy Incorporated, 23,000 from Harbert Management, and then a bunch of smaller contributions from a bunch of different sources, mostly unfamiliar to us. Let's go to the industries, see if that is more illuminating. Retired people, 121,000. Securities and investment, 80,350. 60,900 from leadership PACs, 56,900 from oil and gas, and then a number of other smaller contributions from a variety of interests. No really huge contributions when looked at from the sectoral point of view. I'm sorry, the industry point of view. When looked at it from the sectoral point of view, sectors, industrial sectors, we have 71,000 from agribusiness, 40,500 from communications electronics, 98,645 from construction, let's see, 5,000 from defense, 82,700 from energy, natural resources, fire sector, 197,000, health, 66,000, lawyers and lobbyists, 48,000, transportation, 61,000, miscellaneous business, 64,000, ideology, single issue groups, 126,000. And from the other category, 122,050. We don't know what's in the other category, of course. So you can pretty well see this guy is Freedom Caucus all the way, ideology, single issue, big dollars, fire sector, big dollars. So those are patterns we often see from candidates who are decidedly right-wing. So let's take another look. Maybe the PACs will be still more illuminating. From business PACs, $330,995. From labor PACs, $4,000. I wonder what labor unions those were. Ideological PACs, $74,500. Usually the Freedom Caucus members are big on ideology, and they get a lot of these types of ideological contributions. So that is Gary Palmer's story. Let us move on then. Of course, I mentioned he flunked, the litmus test, so number one bites the dust. Here we go with number two, Byron Donalds. He was an incumbent. He was a winner. He had a Democratic opponent named Cindy Banyai. She raised $108,406. So she was outraised by 56 times. And since Byron Donalds spent $5.3 million and Cindy Banyai spent about $106,000, roughly speaking, he outspent her by 53 times also. He emerged with $737,991 on hand. She emerged with $277,257 on hand. So obviously she didn't try very hard to win. She only spent $106,000 on winning. There was an independent candidate with no data on the independent candidate. There was some outside spending in this. It was for Byron Donalds. Super PAC or carry committee did some outside spending on him. $282,000. There was no money opposed to Byron Donalds. So let's try to get more information here. Byron Donalds got 68% of the vote. Cindy Banyai got 32% of the vote. Byron Donalds had small individual contributions. So he's very popular with small donors, less than 200, raised $2.4 million from the small donors. They were his biggest chunk of money, 44%. But that said, there were large individual contributions of $2.2 million, about 39% of what was raised. PAC contributions of $572,000. So Byron Donalds flunks the litmus test in spite of the good job he did in fundraising. By the way, this is a guy who probably could have won handily just on the small individual contributions. But instead, he tried to raise $2.7 million more from other sources. He had no candidate self-financing, of course. Cindy Banyai raised $65,000 from small dollar donations, $39,000 from large individual contributions, and $4,500 from PACs. So that was what she raised. So I'm not going to check on who supported her because she had so little financial support. In the first place, I will check on Byron Donalds, though. His industries were retired people, he really had them down well. He raised $839,327 from people who were retired. I wonder how he did that. I find that amazing. Of course, he's from Florida, but still, this is Florida District 19, the 2022 race. From Republican conservative groups, he got 663,516. From securities and investments, 147,000. From real estate, 146,000. 88,000 from leadership PACs, 87,000 from insurance, 57,000 from health professionals, 55,000 from oil and gas interests, and lots of other contributions, which I will not go into. But you can see where the money was coming from just from those. When I go to the sectors, it's going to be even more important. We're here now. 70,000 from agribusiness, 50,000 from communications and electronics, 72,000 from construction, only $5,405 from defense, 77,156 from energy, natural resources, 515,449 from the fire sector. So that's his shtick. It's the fire sector. He did raise $87,410 from health industry, and from lawyers and lobbyists, $89,000. Only $1,176 from labor. From ideology single issue groups, $858,061. That is a lot of money from ideology single interest groups. Check out the PACs. It's pretty apparent it's going to be mostly business PACs here. 427,000 from business PACs, 1,000 from labor PACs, and 150,450 from ideological PACs. So that's the story. When it comes to PACs, for Byron Donalds in the Florida 19th, 2022 race. There was some outside spending in this race, as I said earlier. Byron Donalds got 282,336 from that. One organization, a carry committee called Elbert Guillory's America, gave him 245,000. There were a couple of PACs that gave him very little money, including the House Freedom Fund, only $1,227. And from the Project Freedom PAC, Super PAC actually, he got $30,000. So most of his outside spending came from Elbert Guillory's America, $247,000, and Protect Freedom PAC, Super PAC, $30,000. So that was the outside spending story for him. There was no outside spending for the Democratic candidate in this race. So as we said before, Byron Donalds fails the litmus test on grounds of his substantial PAC contributions and his large individual contributions. Altogether, $2.7 million in those. But we have to note $2.4 million in small individual contributions, okay, as well. So let's go on here. I still don't see Dee. I was kind of expecting her. Oh, she's here.
I'm here.
Hi, I didn't realize you were here. I didn't hear the normal ping I get when you join.
Yeah, I get the ping too. Yeah, I understand. I just figured you were busy, that once you saw I was here, you would let me in.
Yes, I would. Of course. I would happily let you in.
Mm-hmm.
So, Steve Wolfbrand is here. Uh, Steve Wolfbrand. Hey, Doc, you've been watching the UFO whistleblower. Okay, whistleblower sty. I'm not sure what you mean by sty, but I did see the coverage of the UFO whistleblowers on the Crystal and Sagas program. Oh, she said stuff. Sorry. Yes, I have been watching it. It is a bit of a personal vindication for me because Bonnie, as a relatively young person years ago, very definitely saw uh, one unidentified flying object that was hovering over the city of Buffalo and her area specifically. And so she actually had a UFO experience, okay, at one time. And of course, the coverage of the the UFO issue now is very validating for her. And since I always took her word at face value, it is very validating for me too. Uh, Steve Wolfbrand asked of Robert, do you think Newsom will jump into this election? Robert said, Steve, I don't know. Steve and Robert, okay, it seems to me that if things continue to go south for Biden, and as the months wear on, he gets more and more unpopular, which I think is, going to happen because he seems to be botching up everything. Uh, I think RFK Jr. is going to be getting stronger and stronger, and the DNC will realize it doesn't have a ghost of a chance with Biden and that it has to do something. So I think efforts will be made to get Biden to gracefully retire. And then they'll need somebody to counteract RFKJ and Marianne Williamson, maybe as well. And they'll do that by going to Gavin Newsom, I think. After all, he's going to have the support of Nancy Pelosi, won't he? And Robert says, I'll be supporting a couple of local races and some ballot measures. Steve says, Robert, I don't know either. I'm thinking he'll wait for the next one. I'm thinking he won't wait for the next one. If Biden over 3 months from now continues to get more unpopular, so we're into September, and his disapproval ratings are getting even worse than they are now, and Robert Kennedy is rapidly gaining on him, they're going to have to go to somebody else who's got some popular appeal. They're going to have to jettison Harris. And I think Gavin Newsom's the obvious choice. I mean, he's a governor. He won convincingly. He sometimes is able to talk a good game. Of course, the progressives will be very much against him. But when does the DNC listen to the progressives? So I think we may very well see a primary contest pitting Gavin Newsom against RFKJ. Doc, you need to address AI and UFO disclosure. Our future is changing rapidly. Well, our future is changing rapidly, but of course, what can I say about AI? Of course, I've studied AI in earlier years, okay, a good deal, not too much of late, but uh, with my AI interest, okay, my email address is eisai at comcast.net. The EIS stands for Executive Information Systems, which is the company Brian and I have, and the AI in AI, the EISAI, stands for artificial intelligence. So the email name stood for Executive Information Systems Artificial Intelligence. So back then, I was a big fan of artificial intelligence. I'm still very impressed with all the capabilities, okay, of artificial intelligence. But I also think that the people who have been saying that AI represents a threat that we must respond to, because it's possible that the AIs will become independent of our decision making and will be able to control us. I've always thought the capability for that was there. And I think that's all I'm going to say about it, because it's not an immediate thing that the powers that be are going to address. So the problem is still the same. We have to get rid of the powers that be. We have to dump the corruption. That is the most important thing. Now, Steve, I have to say, I don't know why Sabby Sabs doesn't directly address that. She talks about the corruption often enough. She knows what I've been doing with respect to dump the corruption. I think she should address it a lot more. I think generally independent media should take up the cause, okay, of dump the corruption, and should push not voting for anybody who takes any big money. We have to make that a movement by 2024, or we're going to lose big. We got to get both these parties out of there, all the people who are taking big money, and we have to give the independents, the libertarians, and the Green Party, even MPP, we have to give them a chance, because we must have unbought people in office. Yesterday, Robert Copeland says AI scares the heck out of me. Yeah. I agree with that. And Robert says, don't know much about that one. That is magic mushrooms legalized. Yeah, magic mushrooms ought to be legalized. They're no more dangerous than marijuana. In my view, we've known about them for a long time, and we know the experience of taking magic mushrooms can be very liberating. Uh, I think we ought to facilitate that. I don't think that's a problem. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say about the AI and the UFO disclosures at this point. I don't know much more about the UFO disclosures except that spacecraft of extraterrestrial origins have been found, and the government has been hiding that from us. Of course, I resent that. I'm always for transparency. I hate it when the government takes a paternalistic view to the rest of us. It's terrible that they do that. But I have to wait for more information about the properties of the extraterrestrial spacecraft, uh, and also any information we can get about uh, how they came to be available to us. I certainly want to hear about that, but I still think the most important issue we have to face right now is to dump the corruption issue. Okay, today, Laura Fielding, okay, of the Red Berets, was tweeting, and she was complaining about the reason why, we can't get the Medicare for All bill through is because our representatives are bought. So Laura, who's a good friend of mine, I believe, uh, I addressed her directly. Okay. I showed her the rule, and I asked her if she was going to vote based on the rule. I also asked her if her family, who she'd been talking to about the corruption in the system, was also going to base their vote on the rule. And she said she and her husband would do that. And she also said that she was going to ask her extended family to do that as well. And she thought there's a pretty good chance that they would. Steve says, I took some mushrooms a few weeks ago. They told me they have taught me all they could. The rest I have to figure out for myself. That's interesting. Steve Wolfbrand said Sabby wasn't cool on that. I know she's not cool on that. And I think that uh, she and the RBN want to de-emphasize completely uh, uh, activity with respect to elections because they think that the elections are totally rigged. I certainly agree with her and everybody else who talks about the rigging of elections, but I don't think the elections can easily be rigged if everybody votes against the big money, in the elections. I think then every one of the House members is going to go down. It depends on how strong the movement is. What Sadby advocates, of course, is voting for third parties, when she talks about voting. Well, functionally, what I'm talking about would also result in voting for third parties because, as we've been seeing in this series, all of the candidates of the major parties are on the take. So they're all going to lose. So third parties are finally going to have a chance. That's going to be a side effect of what I'm talking about. So why don't I just advocate for voting for third parties? Because the case that has to be made is that the two major parties are corrupt. And
Mhm.
that's why you would vote for the third parties. So I don't want to make the parties the fulcrum of this. I want to make the corruption the fulcrum of this. And I want to say, vote against the corrupt people. You can see who they are. Vote against them. Why do I want people to vote against them? Because if people always vote against the corruption, we will never have corruption again. But if they vote for third parties and the third parties think they won because of their own appeal, they might very well get bought by the corruption again. But if we make the issue the corruption and the corruption of everyone who's on the take, then we can make that a permanent issue. And even without any legislation or changes to the Constitution, we can see to it that no candidate takes any big money again. That's why I emphasize whether a candidate has taken any big money or not, rather than the third party issue. I think that the party issue is a separate issue. Once you've decided to vote against anyone taking big money, then you still have to decide on which individuals to vote for and which
Mhm.
candidates to vote for. Okay, I myself, okay, am for the Green Party, generally speaking, but I also think that the first order of business is voting against the corruption, and the second order of business is deciding on which remaining party you vote for. So that's my view on it, but it's not simply savvy. It's a bunch of the independent media people. They're getting all involved in the election details. They're getting all involved in the news, different kinds of news, and failures to do things right, and corruption, and that's all very interesting. All those details are very interesting. But what do they amount to when it comes to action? What they amount to when it comes to action is you got to get rid of the corrupt people. The bottom line on this, the first order of business, is dump the corruption. Now, I'm in complete agreement that while dumping the corruption is going on, we need active movements on the union front. We certainly do. I'm not here to discourage any activism on that. I'm not here to discourage any activism when it comes to Medicare for all. I wear the red beret because I'm a Medicare for all activist, obviously. So uh, I encourage all those kinds of activism. But I say again, the first order of business is dumping the corruption so the activism can be successful. That's what I think. Anyway, I just finished the second candidate, so I'm now going to go to the third one. But before I do, third one is Mike Collins in the Georgia 10th. But before I do, I also want to bring up a couple of other people here. If you'll excuse me for just another moment. I thought it was interesting, by the way, how much money was raised by Byron Donalds. It's interesting how some of the Freedom Caucus people don't raise a lot of money, but other Freedom Caucus people raise a crap load of money. Just money all over the place. And I find that very interesting, of course. One more moment while I pull up somebody else. Okay, now I'm set for the rest of the show. We ran a little bit over on Dee's show, so I didn't quite have time to get everything all set up. So next, we have Georgia District 10. And Mike Collins. Let me share the screen for this. Dee, any comments?
When you were mentioning the show tonight, that while you were late here, I would like to tell everybody we had a very invigorating conversation, and the time just flew by.
It was invigorating, wasn't it?
Yes.
We were all very invigorated tonight.
Oh.
Yeah, I think it's a show people should not miss.
Mm-hmm. And you know, during one part of the show, when one of the articles was talking about, in quotes, the Israeli lobby. I mean, we bring that up on your show all the time when we go through the candidates and
we all see they've got some money from some of the Israeli lobby groups.
Yes.
Okay, and usually from AIPAC, but from other groups as well.
Right.
Okay, AIPAC contributes to Democrats, contributes to progressives, and it contributes to the Freedom Caucus Republicans and to the regular Republicans. It contributes to everybody.
Yeah, and you talk about the lobby too. We have the different presidential candidates flying over to Israel and getting right in there, talking about how much they love Israel and what they will do for for Israel. They can't get enough of loving Israel.
But I have to say, some of them are probably raising money when they're over there in Israel. Okay, I'm sure the way they raise it, okay, is indirectly. In other words, they don't just go over there and take money. But I'm sure they get promises from people, and then the money is funneled through third parties in the United States and goes into their coffers that way. Does anybody know whether Nikki Haley was going over to Israel?
Oh, definitely.
Oh, she is, huh? Okay.
Oh, yeah, she loves Israel. She can't get enough of Israel. Or in DeSantis, when here he was banning the Diary of Anne Frank and then going over to Israel asking for money.
He was banning the Diary of Anne Frank?
Yes. his book banning in Florida.
Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing? And they're going after Roger Waters
I know, right?
for his anti-fascism, and uh, they're not going after Ron DeSantis
No.
when he's banning the Diary of Anne Frank.
Yes, and then he's
What
asking them for money for his
gross,
campaign.
what gross hypocrisy is that?
Exactly.
The regime in Israel is full of incredible hypocrisy,
Yes, they are.
just incredible. But it's on hypocrisy that authoritarian regimes survive. Okay, Mike Collins, he was the winner of this race. He was not the incumbent. This is the first time he was elected, evidently. He raised $1,064,458, spent $867,386, ended with cash on hand $197,072. He was opposed by Tabitha Johnson Green, who raised the princely sum of $46,701 and had no cash on hand at the end. So she was outspent by more than 20 times. Obviously, she lost. There were some other candidates in the primary. They were Republican candidates. Vernon Jones. Oh, no, this was outside spending. Sorry. This is outside spending by candidates, on candidates. So Vernon Jones got $210,000 in outside spending and was opposed by $27,000. And Mike Collins, the winner of the race, got $110,221 in outside spending, supporting him, but he got zero opposing him. David Curry, another Republican candidate, got $70,000 in outside spending, zero opposing him. And Jody Heiss, who used to be a congressman, he was probably the retiring congressman in this district, got $500 opposing him. Must have been before he dropped out. This is a red district. Very, very red district. Let us take a look at the candidates page. So Mike Collins got 64.5% of the vote. Had a pretty typical pattern. 34,500 in small contributions, 3.24% of his contributions. Large individual contributions over $200, 771,525, 73% of what he raised. His PAC contributions were 123,100. That was 12% of what he raised. And he did candidate self-financing of 131,000, which is, in other words, another large individual contribution, this time of 131,000. That was 12.3% of what he raised. So he flunks the litmus test on large individual contributions and also on his PAC contributions. Okay, as well, Tabitha Johnson Green got 35.5% of the vote on only $46,000. That's not bad. She didn't do much in the small individual contributions area either. 6.73% of what she raised. She had large individual contributions of $7,205, PAC contributions of $35,956. So she got supported by Democratic PACs. That's interesting, but they didn't spend enough to give her a chance. It's probably a very red district. And that's probably why. Let's look at the sectors. Sector totals for this member of the Freedom Caucus. $12.6 thousand in agribusiness, 6,400 communications electronics, 67,200 construction, 47,000 from energy natural resources, 95,750 from the private sector, from the fire sector, 65,000 from transportation, 74,000 from the ideology single issue groups, 74,000 in the other category, details hidden from us, basically. So that's the story of that race. The ideology single issue groups gave considerable money.
And that makes you suspicious in a way, like, who are these people?
Well, they're probably people like Koch brothers and maybe Sheldon Adelson, maybe the Mercers, the real rich ones out there who want to see the Unfreedom Caucus win.
Okay.
Yeah, because the Freedom Caucus is certainly not for freedom.
No, it's not.
I mean, it's obviously, it's for, I said, domination by business, slavery for workers. It's for the oligarchy. Wants to make things even more easy for the oligarchy than the other Republicans do. So I think that's the Mike Collins story. I'm going to move on to Randy Weber. Well, I'm move on first.
Robert Copeland says, another one bites the dust. Does Collins fail the litmus test? Yep.
Yes, indeed,
Another one
another one
bites
bites
the
the dust. This is Warren Davidson. He is from Ohio. He ran in District 8, okay, in Ohio. He raised $940,371, spent $1,007,619, ended with cash on hand of $337,467,000. Are you telling me I need to share this?
Yes.
Yes, you're right. I did have to share this. Okay, Warren Davidson is like somehow kind of maybe second in the Freedom Caucus to Jim Jordan. He's another Ohio really, really right winger in a very red district. Okay, the Democrat in that district got outside spending in support of her of $66. Davidson had $19,077 in outside spending in favor of him. And Phil Heimlich got $3,752 in outside spending. There was no data on any other candidates in the race in terms of what they raised directly for their campaigns. There was no data on the Democratic candidate, Vanessa Enoch, for example. It was that Republican district. So, heavy red district, basically one party district. Davidson got 65% of the vote. And Vanessa Enoch, it doesn't say how much, what the percent of the vote was that she got. Evidently, that data was not available. Well, it's interesting. I wonder how that data could not be available. I mean, it's voting data directly in the election.
Right, it makes no sense.
It makes no sense. Who had the other 35% of the vote? It isn't listed here. I think it's an imperfection in their data. It's an error of some kind. So, small individual contributions for Warren Davidson, $74,000, just about 8% of what he raised. His large individual contributions were $412,000, about 44% of what he raised. His PAC contributions were $398,686, about 42% of what he raised. So you can see already he flunks the litmus test straight up. Okay, on these grounds alone, the outside spending was not substantial enough to affect the race, although Warren Davidson led in the outside spending. For sure, I'm going to check to see what things were looking like on the sector level. Relatively small contributions until you get to the fire sector. $290,045 for Davidson from the fire sector. Another big sector was miscellaneous business sector, but then, of course, there was the ideology single issue sector. That was almost $105,000. Then there was the other category was $114,000. We don't know what's in this category. So the fire sector and the ideology single issue sectors were the two main contributors to a campaign that clearly Warren Davidson bites the dust because of his large individual contributions and his PAC contributions. So let's go to last candidate now. Last candidate is Randy Weber. I should probably present Randy Weber's page. Texas District 14. Randy Weber was the incumbent. He raised $1,028,000 in round figures, spent $1,057,000, still ended up with $442,000 left over. Was running against the Democrat whose name was Miko Williams. or Michael Williams, spelled Mikal, raised $73,000, spent $51,600, ended with cash on hand $21,916. There was some outside spending in favor of Randy Weber, but it wasn't a factor. He was supported to the tune of $1,192 and didn't have any opposition in outside spending. Looking at the candidates page for 2022, we have Randy Weber with 68.6% of the vote. Small individual contributions, only 2%, 2.71%. Large individual contributions, 574,241. That was 56% of Randy Weber's funds raised. And PACs contributed $317,024, about 31% of what he raised. There was no candidate self-financing. There was $108,544 in contributions that were categorized, as other. I have to say, I don't know what the other could be. If it's not in small individual contributions or large individual contributions, it's not in PAC contributions, it's not in super PAC contributions because they're in the category of outside spending, and it's not the candidate self-financing, what's left for the other category? That's always puzzled me. I don't see why there is another that category, but he raised 11% roughly, in that category. So Mika Williams got 31.4% of the vote with the $52,000 he spent. So he was outspent by 20 times, but he still got 31.4% of the vote. Not bad from that point of view, but it's just probably a totally red district, gerrymandered. He probably never had a chance. He had 40% of his contributions from individual small contributions, $29,281. Large individual contributions, $42,000. That was 58% of what he raised. His PAC contributions were $250, 34% of what he raised. And he did a little candidate self-financing, about $1,200, which was 1.6% of what he raised. There were other candidates who ran in this race, but they weren't in the final round. There's no data for these candidates, so I'm not even going to mention them. They didn't really figure in this race. So Randy Weber easily won, but Randy Weber also bites the dust. The fifth and final Freedom Caucus candidate to bite the dust here. Let's look at his sectors for whatever they can tell us about where the money came from. Agribusiness, $38,000. Construction, $64,000. Energy, natural resources, $78,000. Fire sector, $91,000. $67,000 from transportation, $58,200 in miscellaneous business, very little from labor. Ideology single issue groups, $157,359. So that tells his story as a radical right Freedom Caucus person. And again, he bites the dust. So, Robert, you were right. You were absolutely right. all 5 bit the dust. On Friday, we move on to the Senate. Steve says, Robert, what about legalized magic mushrooms? Robert says, don't know much about that one. Steve Wolfbrand said on 939, I took some mushrooms a few weeks ago. They told me they have taught me all that they could. The rest I have to figure out myself. That was funny. Now I have a ton of mushrooms on my hands. If anyone wants some. Steve Wolfbrand says, agreed, Doc. Indie left channels are rather disappointing lately. Well, it's not because the people are afraid. I mean, I don't think it's because of that, Steve. I don't think. Uh, I don't think that my colleagues from the independent channels are afraid of telling the truth. I think they're just tending to focus on. I just don't like their priorities very much. Let's put it that way. Okay, here we have the neoliberalism priority. We have the coming changes in international politics priority. And above all, we have the dump the corruption priority. Strikes me, those are the 3 biggest issues. There's a lot of other crap, okay, that's running around, but I'm not saying that it's not important. For example, the attack on trans people right now, that is really, really a big issue and really, really important. It's outrageous. The attack that's going on in the legislatures across the country, coming from the Republican side, it is so discriminatory. It's so violating of equity and equality. It's so unfair. It's just disgusting. Uh, I think probably at some point we're going to get into it. Dee's show.
Yes.
Okay, I'm not sure where, but it's just intolerable what they're trying to do to trans people. And we're going to have some sharp words to say about it. But, that issue, the Medicare for All issue, student debt issues, I covered those issues in connection with the neoliberalism stuff that I do on Thursday nights. So I think that between this show and what Dee is covering, okay, I think that those are the priorities. The one other thing I might mention is Julian Assange.
Yes.
Free press issue, censorship issue. That's also very, very big in my book. And Steve Wolfbrand says, since the mushroom world kicked me out, I may have to I botched that up. Since the mushroom world kicked me out, I may have to visit the DMT universe. Enlighten me, please. What is the DMT universe? Oh, that's on Ayahuasca Resort in Costa Rica. I want to visit. I'll report the results. That really sounds interesting, I guess, because of the name Ayahuasca Resort. That sounds Costa Rica. That's always sounded like a friendly country to me, and one with a minimum of corruption in it. Robert Copeland says another one bites the dust as Collins failed. of the litmus test. Yeah, Mike Collins. Anybody know how much BlackRock and Vanguard spent in 2022? I do not know, but I'm pretty sure they have PACs and super PACs, and they support certain super PACs. I just don't know which one. Robert says failure number 4 is Davidson fails the litmus test. Yes. Robert says we have had Proud Boys showing up at the Sacramento City Council meetings last month. Oh, wonderful, Robert. That's just so wonderful. I can't express how wonderful it is. Of course, they're all over. Wouldn't be surprised if they don't show up here in Ashburn, Virginia before too long. Anyway, thank you guys for coming and for sticking with us.
Yes.
I think it's very important that you do. Okay, tomorrow night I'll have a show. It's one in the neoliberal category. And we're going to talk about some spending caps in the debt ceiling deal. That is spending caps in name only. We're also going to talk about the return, of neoliberalism through a Substack that was recently offered by Stephanie Kelton. And we're also going to talk about the new economic patriotism and what that is. That looks like a slogan that may go somewhere, but we'll talk about where it is now and which candidates it's likely to be consistent with. So it looks like now we're into the return of neoliberalism and how we can fight it. Yeah, the debt ceiling just really saw that Biden returned us to neoliberalism in that fight with that compromise with Kevin McCarthy. That is what it was. It was directly a rejection of Stephanie's book. It was a rejection of some of the central parts, of MMT, as I've offered before. It was a piece of idiocy. So we're going to talk some about that tomorrow. Okay, as well.
Sounds like it's going to be a great show.
Yeah,
it's going to be, and I think it's going to move fast with those topics.
Yeah, I think it's going to move fast with those topics too. Yeah, I think these shows move a little slower because it's sort of the pattern is a cut and dried pattern. Okay, but I think we're learning something out of it.
Yes, we are.
And what I think we're learning is that even more important than the PACs are sources of funds. And in most races, even more than the super PACs, though in some races, the super PACs are absolutely dominant. But those are relatively few races across the country still. Maybe 20 races across the country or something like that. But the constant factor in most every race where the major party candidates are involved, which is to say all races, the major factor in those races is the contributions over $200 that come from the well-off people. They're the ones the candidates really rely on.
And those are the ones that they're listening to.
Those are the ones, well, I'm sure they listen to the PACs also because some have
Yeah.
substantial PAC contributions as well. But their feeling for what uh, constitute hot buttons for the relatively wealthy individuals, I think that really determines a lot of what they're going to be afraid of and a lot of what they're going to fight for. And I also think that it explains why there's so much in the business of individual tax cuts. Because I think they're appealing to those people as individuals who pay taxes and who it doesn't matter how well off they are, they don't want to pay the income taxes.
Nope. And then too, when it comes to Israel,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, well, I think when it comes to Israel, there's a lot of money being raised from the billionaires, from just a
yes.
few billionaires who have enormous amounts of money. Like Sheldon Adelson's widow, since he's now passed on. Okay, and also the Mercer family, and uh, probably Musk and Bill Gates and Warren Buffett and those people. They give out an awful lot of money in various ways.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, we're looking at their influence in politics too. And George Soros,
Oh yeah.
he still has a lot of influence, even though he gave away $18 billion to the Open Society Foundation. He still retained about $7 billion for himself and his family. So that can buy you a lot of political influence in certain quarters. Certainly. Okay, folks, I guess that's all for tonight. We're going to say good night.
And please
Ah,
hit the
yes.
like button, subscribe, and share.
Here is yes. And buy me a coffee, please. And Lana says, I've been listening in the background. Good night, all. And Steve Wolfbrand says, thank you all. Steve Wolfbrand says, hi, Lana. Lana says, hi, Steve. Good night, all. Sleep well. And Lana says, I see the UBI goons are back too. I haven't seen them on Twitter much, but I've had some trolls today, on Twitter. And Lana says, I have back-to-back Zoom calls tomorrow and Friday night. Okay, I hope they're good Zoom calls. And Steve Wolfbrand says, Robert actually shows up. Much love to him. Yeah, Robert does show up. He always shows up. Right. You show up too, Steve. You always
Yes, and
show up.
we really appreciate your input. Steve
Yeah,
always had good input.
and we really appreciate the two of you.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And we appreciate Lonnie too.
Yes, everybody pretty much, we appreciate what people are thinking and feeling and how they think about the different issues. It's always important to get, the audience how they feel and how they interpret what's being said.
Yeah. Well, everybody, Steve Wolfbrand says good night all and sleep well, and I certainly second that. And good night all
Yes, good
and
night
sleep
all.
well. And Dee, you sleep well too. And by the way, buy Dee a coffee.
Yes, please buy Joe a coffee. Okay, good night, everybody.
Okay, good night. And thanks.